Today I'm sitting down with Dr. Kate Truitt, psychologist, neuroscientist, and trauma expert. She's also someone who's lived trauma, and she speaks about it very candidly in this episode. This conversation got very real very fast. We talked about how my own trauma with my family and my dad shaped who I became, the choices I made, and the ways my brain learned to survive from a very young age. In the last 2 years, the rewiring has been vital. Dr. Truitt breaks down the science of trauma, how it lives in the body, how it impacts the brain, and why so many of us stay stuck in fight or flight, even without realizing it. And this can happen for decades. This is what it's like to live on autopilot and not realize that we're really hurting ourselves by not addressing these things. But what I love about this conversation is that she gives real, tangible tips on what you can do starting now to start rewiring your brain. Real practices you can apply to immediately start healing and creating the life that isn't run by survival. Dr. Kate Truitt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful for your patience and
of course,
having this moment come to life.
I'm so glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Will you tell our listeners just a little bit about what you went through over the last few months?
Yeah. So when we originally scheduled to have this conversation, I think it was just a few days before, actually, I was in a terrible car accident leaving my clinic in Pasadena. I was T-boned by a drunk driver. Turned out they already had 5 DUIs on record, but were still driving legally. And later, we also found out that this individual was on record, both court and also social media, for frequently driving around drunk, trying to get into a car accident as a means to complete the act of suicide.
Oh my gosh.
So just so many levels, psychologically, physically, soulfully in the recovery. I had a broken neck, crushed spine, concussion. So that was over 9 months ago.
It's been a very long and still ongoing road to recovery.
Yeah, it is. Very much so.
Well, I'm very glad that you were able to survive that and to see you here now. It's nice to see you on a better path now.
Well, it's nice to finally see you.
I know.
In 3D, in person, to give you a hug and say hi.
Yeah, so I'm so glad to have you here. I cannot wait to pick your brain, for lack of a better, for the next hour or so, because I'm very fascinated by your work. And I think specifically because you're someone who's lived through trauma. You're not only a trauma expert, but also someone who's integrated your experience and you can speak on it in such a personal way.
Very much so.
Yeah. What, if you could point to a few of the things that you've gone through in your life, that has informed your relationship to trauma.
Oh, that's a tall order.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Midwest and there's 80s, 90s. I was born in 1980. I'm 45 years old. And there wasn't a conversation around mental health, psychology, wellness, or psychotherapy. And I had some pretty complex, very abusive, painful situations that I was navigating as a child, as a teen. And I didn't know where to go for help.
There's no language for it.
No. And we were supposed to be fine, which I know is not specific to Midwestern culture. That's specific to so many cultures and family dynamics where our parents had been through a lot themselves.
Right.
So my response to that was I started working on suicide hotlines when I was 14 and a half. Now, the scary thing is in Kansas, you can drive at 14 and a half. They have something called farm laws, which is terrifying in retrospect. But as soon as I could drive, I found some place I could go volunteer because that was where I could go learn something about mental health and give back. And that's started a launch pad of investigating the human mind, trauma, learning a lot about my own trauma. I've been very open about my story. My memoir came out last year, and I struggled with suicidal ideation based on my own trauma, and really just wanted to understand why did my brain want to hurt me to the point of it wanted me to exit stage left and stop breathing. And that became the launch pad for everything I do today, is to help people understand and have the language for what our brainy brains are doing, because they're weird.
How does the brain take on trauma and store it way back there where later on it surfaces? I mean, it can surface like it did for you in adolescence. And I know my trauma also surfaced for me in adolescence. But what happens to the mind? How does it get trapped there?
Yeah. And looking at the developmental trajectory of our brain plays a huge role in how trauma impacts us when something happens.
Mm-hmm.
The more traumatic experiences we have as we're developing, the more susceptible or vulnerable our brain is to future trauma. Something called adverse childhood experiences, which is getting a lot more airtime these days, and people are interested on their own ACEs number, as we call it. You can go online and do a quiz. And it's not a bad thing to do. It's important to have the data around how vulnerable might our brain be. The reality is that we have a very ancient part of our brain called the amygdala. And
Amygdala Amy?
Yep. Amygdala Amy. Yes. And this part of our brain predates the dinosaurs. So what we know about evolution is evolution keeps what works.
Our mind is meant to keep us safe.
It's meant to keep us alive.
It's meant to keep us alive, to procreate, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, our mind, I think, our brain and our mind are slightly different constructs. Our brain wants us to stay alive against all odds. And our brain is a predictive pattern machine. It's a very expensive thing to run. And that means it finds easy button patterns, kind of like the Staples commercial. I want an easy button. Our brain's an easy button king or queen. And that means it finds the patterns that work. And when we have hard experiences in our childhood, our brain learns this pattern kept me alive. And it locks in that pattern through a specific type of neuroplasticity that's stress informed. And that becomes the freeway that our brain uses as the prediction for the rest of our life, unless we help the pattern change, which is easier said than done, but it can be done, which is very exciting.
How did you notice your trauma showing up in patterns? And how do you explain that?
I mean, the obvious one when somebody's struggling with suicidal considerations is, I just wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. And those were thoughts I started having when I was 10, 11 years old. And I just didn't understand it. I think, and another one was, I'm now a widow. I was widowed when I was 29. But the relationship I built with my partner, we were together 10 years before he passed, was very codependent. And our attachment patterns informed one another so much so that we were this little isolation ball where we felt that it was us and then there was the world. And neither of us were super good at operating in the rest of the world without the other one. And that was another version of trauma showing up for both of us in different ways.
Codependency is a big one. Yeah. No, I went through that as well.
Yeah.
Because I was seeking safety my whole life.
Yes.
And so when I met my ex-husband at 21, it became a very codependent relationship because it was the only source of safety I felt I had. And it's wrong because it's not the only.
No.
But at the time, I didn't know how to stop and say, you have a roof over your head. You have family. You have friends. You're capable. I associated safety with so many other things. My mind associated with it because there was so much lack of it growing up.
Yes.
So I seeked it out, even though at that age, it isn't what I even wanted.
No.
My mind.
But your Amy.
My Amy. Said, yeah.
And you found a person that didn't give you necessarily what was an authentic experience of safety that perhaps you now know is that feeling of, oh, I am foundationally safe. I have my own back. I know I have worth. I know I have agency. At 21, just like I was 18 when I met John, the experience was this person gives me a sense of some version of stability or steadiness or something that I've never had before. And we'll just tag that, hashtag safety. Let's go all in. And that becomes the new reality.
So John was your fiance or your husband?
He died a week before our wedding after being together for 10 years.
What did he die from?
He was a victim of the opioid epidemic. So he had been unwell for quite some time, which is very complex as a psychologist who worked in addiction. And we didn't know what was going on. And this was back in 2009 when we were in the midst of physicians just prescribing. And so he was addicted. And we had actually set it up so that the day after our wedding, rather than going on our honeymoon, he was going to go to treatment because he refused to not have our wedding. And we were a week late. He died of an accidental overdose a week before the wedding.
So for you to have such a codependent relationship and now this person is no longer
Gone.
What happened to you?
Oh, spiral. I mean, what happened when you got divorced?
Spiral.
It's the world falls out. And for me, that safety, even though we were, going through a divorce, going through what I was navigating, there's obviously a lot of complex dynamics there that don't feel safe. But also when the person that is our other half, neurobiologically our other half, disappears, the mind and the body system are cleaved in half.
And what does the repair for that look like?
I'll ask you the same question. What did the repair for that look like?
Well, I chose the divorce. So I think it was more, I looked at the trajectory of the next few years as something I would approach from an empowering place, because that's how I wanted to see my life and not see it through the lens of a victim. But I was not prepared for what I went through. And, I went from my parents' house to my husband's house. And so I didn't know what it was like to stand on my own 2 feet. I didn't know what and also being told over and over and over, you're not going to succeed on your own. I give you 2 weeks. I give you a year to come crying back. You're going to fumble. You're going to fall. You're going to fail. Because that agrees with the narrative that I lived with for 16 years, where I was reassured, whether through my own subconscious or through the person in front of me, that this is the safest place for you. You can go out into the world and succeed, but make sure you come home because this is the safest place for you. And so I had to learn, the world is not that scary. And even if it is, I have agency.
Yes.
And not only that, I have 2 little boys who I have to also create this safety for. But what happens when this is something I'm working on now is, how do I not project my old fears onto my kids? I'm fine on my own now, but how do I not project everything I went through as a child, watching my own parents divorce, project that onto my children unnecessarily?
And really strong work, being mindfully aware of that. That is the first step that we can take. And I think going through the journey, I know going through the journey that I went through, I carried those fears into any type of relationship. And it eventually ended up saying, I will never date again. I'm going to be strong and independent and fierce. And this romance stuff is wackadoodle and weird and hard because I didn't trust myself not to fall into that same hole of codependency. And then I am now remarried, and this fellow just kind of figured it out. And it's amazing. But the journey that my brain went through was a complete rearrangement of everything I expected or understood about the world. And having already been somebody who studied trauma and was a neuroscience-based expert in trauma, I was so mad at my brain for continually betraying me. It's like, I know better. Why am I still spiraling?
Why do our brains do that?
Because they get stuck in the old patterns.
How does that happen? When does that happen? The getting stuck in an old pattern. And when does that pattern actually develop? Because I can't pinpoint when it developed. I just know it happened that way.
So I like to think about the amygdala as having 3 core values. And this year we have a ton of data that we finally started looking at. And it actually came true that my theory was correct, which is phenomenal when that happens. Those values are, first and foremost, am I safe? And the amygdala, it develops while we're still in utero, which means that if our parent has, or if there's complex dynamics in the household while we're in gestation, if our mother's going through complexities in her pregnancy, if there's stress, our amygdala is learning to operate with a slightly higher stress responsivity than it might otherwise. Now, that's not a death sentence. It just means that our amygdala is going, oh, I'm going to be a little more vigilant or aware. And then as we come into the world, our amygdala starts learning more about safety, but also starts tapping into the second core value of connection, belonging, lovability. Why? You have 2 lovely little boys. When they were born, how independent were they?
Not really.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I'm like, is this a trick question?
Yeah, no, not
they're
at
not
all.
independent.
Yeah, we are one of the very few mammals that is fully dependent on our caregiver, because eventually we'll have this big, beautiful noggin that we think is so cool. Except our little Amy, the amygdala, is primal and super fast and in charge. So what she's learning as we're developing is laying down some pretty core patterns. And then fundamentally, the third core value is agency and empowerment. So we can have a sense of, I know I'm safe, I know I have connection, but I don't have agency. That will make the brain more vulnerable. I don't feel safe, but I do believe people have my back. Well, safety is foundational. So she's going to be seeking danger in every moment. So those values interact with each other all the time. And when they start to become challenged in any way, shape, or form, our brain starts to learn, and it's neuroplasticity.
Right.
And that those ways that the brain is learning in those moments is initially adaptive. So if a child learns to be small and quiet in a house where there's chaos and danger, it's adaptive to be small and quiet. But how might that not be so great when that child goes out into the world as a teen or as a young adult? We need to be big, and we need to be seen in the world as adults.
And take up space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least have felt sense permission that we can take up space.
I always attributed to playing small, in my case, more so to the survival.
Oh, very much so.
Because my parents are immigrants, moved here when I was 1, and it was difficult. And so I only heard arguments about money. I only heard arguments between my parents. And so it was a lot of commotion always happening.
And if your people are contentious.
Yes.
What does a child experience?
Looks for that then in the future, that chaos, that drama.
That's normal.
That's normal. Yeah. So when I went into a new family, and it wasn't, I thought I'm seeking safety because of how it looks on the outside, right? The parents are married, there's a house, there are things that I didn't have, so therefore it must be safe. Unwittingly, now taking on the burden and the trauma that comes from, every family has it, now taking that on and associating it with, this is normal. Because I also heard a lot of yelling when I was young, so this must be normal. But never giving myself the buffer space between the years to say, how about I go and just carve my own path and do something completely different?
Yeah. Well, but looking at connection and that core value, was that a part of the community experience? Was that normative?
Right.
And if it's not normative, then we follow the normative path until something happens or we go, oh, this really isn't working. And it's jarring enough for her system to go, I'm going to make an alternative choice here, a forcing function for something new.
How do you define trauma, and what are the types of trauma?
That is an almost impossible question to answer. I really look at trauma in a slightly different way than a lot of people. It's through the lens of those core values. When there's a really clear direct threat to any of those core values, that the brain learns a new way of being in the world, because those core values are the ways that we stay alive. So if we feel immediate threat to safety, if we feel like our community is going to kick us out, we've been betrayed, we've been harmed, and community could be a dyad, a relationship between two people, or our larger community. It could be a business that we're a part of. Or if we feel like our sense of agency, possibility, or our ability to make choice is taken from us.
So essentially everyone goes through some type of trauma, whether it's a big T trauma or a little T trauma. It's something that changes the way we think and the way that we respond to things.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how does that show up later on in life, and how do we fix it? 5 minutes. That's it.
In 5 minutes, yes.
In 5 minutes.
Yes. It shows up differently for everybody, right? Like, the experiences that you've been through, do you know other individuals who've gone through their version of your journey?
Oh, so many. So many of my girlfriends who have similar experiences. It shows up differently for them, and they've all made different choices, but the core value of it is the same. Yeah.
So the behavioral output is going to be based on the development of how our mind and our body came to understand who we are in the world. And that's based on our family system, our cultural dynamics, the things that we've learned about self and self with other.
Mm-hmm.
In the brain, what's happening is our amygdala is literally popping up a whole bunch of what are called glutamate receptors, particularly our amygdala, that's saying, remember these critical constructs. There's something that we talk about in my model called the sense cascade, which means there is a signal for threat, a signal that indicates that any of those core values are under threat.
Mm-hmm.
Then the E of the sense cascade is the environment is also indicating threat. Like we can strap ourselves into a roller coaster, and if we like roller coasters, it won't be traumatic, even though everything about a roller coaster should signal terrifyingly bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
But as humans, we do it because we're weird. But if you're strapped into a roller coaster and you know there's something faulty with the engineering, the environment's now signaling,
Mm-hmm.
Then our neurobiology responds, and then our little amygdala, after all those things have happened, our brain's already taking in that data, our amygdala then does a safety assessment. So all this is happening so fast. And if there's a check mark next to signal for threat, environment threat, neurobiology says threat, safety assessment says definitely threat, then our brain encodes it and remembers it.
Mm-hmm.
And it encodes not just what's happening with the signal, the primary actual threat, it encodes all of the data happening around us in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
What were other people doing? What was going on in the environment? What were the sensory experiences? What were we seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching in that moment? And creates a story that becomes a new driving story for how we approach our life.
Mm.
And it can take over everything, depending on the level of threat. Or it can take over a small version. Like after the car accident for me driving, whoa, big no-no. Because it's an existential threat, something completely outside my control. I couldn't react. I didn't see the car coming because there was a car blocking my view. There's no alternative choice I could have made.
Mm-hmm.
Just crash. Thank God I'm not dead.
So how do we now convince our minds, or rewire our minds rather, to believing that we're safe?
Yeah.
In life, in general, we're safe.
Yeah. Do you feel it's possible?
I do, because I've reached that point. Not all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a constant practice.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's woven into spirituality as well.
Yeah.
But I do believe it is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll talk about the neurobiology of how
Mm-hmm.
we do that in the clinical sphere.
Mm-hmm.
But just to focus in on what you said there, the spiritual side of things is so important. Our brain is designed to have a larger expansive sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is because that existential angst or threat is so intense and our brain's terrible with uncertainty that it's as though our neurobiology built in an alternative path to say, what if there's something out there that has your back?
Right.
What if that's also possible? Which is really, really powerful, whatever version of spirituality it is.
And how we make choices with people as well. I mean, when I look back
Mm-hmm.
to, I grew up without my father. And anytime that I was with him, he was very critical of me.
Mm.
There was a lot of shaming and yelling, and he didn't know how to communicate properly. So he would see his daughter once a year.
Mm.
And whenever he would see me, he was not approving of me.
I'm
And
sorry.
so
That's so painful.
Thank you. So when I chose my future husband,
Mm.
I picked a man who was present, but also mirrored a lot of similar
Mm.
patterns in how he spoke to me.
Yeah.
And I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same thing of sitting in the car in the driver in the
Mm-hmm.
passenger seat, going on these long road trips and just listening and listening and listening to that tone and the abuse, and then saying later on in life, it's okay, you can recreate that again, because that's what a father feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's known?
What's known?
What's known? Our brain loves what's known. Whether or not it's actually what is healthy and adaptive
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily the thing that our brain focuses on. It's what do we know, because contradictingly, what we know to our amygdala specifically is
Mm-hmm.
safety. The known is safe. And especially if there's been trauma, the known is safe because we've survived.
Right.
No matter how painful or hard, our amygdala is like, high five. We
Mm-hmm.
got this one. We don't need to learn a new pattern here. We know how to be quiet and get smaller and hold our breath and just listen and nod and promise we'll do better next time.
And I think because it fuels the doing better,
Yeah.
which is the scary part, because it also contributes to becoming a very overdoing person.
Yeah, which also has benefit in our society.
It does have benefit in our society. We become very hard on ourselves.
Yes.
And so to give yourself grace is a whole new thing you need to learn later on in life once you realize what self-compassion is. But in the moment, and it's not a moment because it goes for years or if not decades for some people, it's believing that, okay, I got this little, whatever it is, the insult or the critique. Now I'm going to go do better and show how much I can do better in the world. And then when I come back, daddy's going to approve.
Yes.
Except it's not daddy.
It's not.
And we give that power away to all the people in our lives who we now seek approval from, or rather are now seeking the repeated pain because we have identified that as familiar.
And so a big way that we sidestep that, and you mentioned Amy, the amygdala, is building a very loving, collaborative relationship with Amy. When we catch those patterns, when we catch those motivations that are coming from the hard, painful experiences or beating ourselves up, it's as though we're turning to Amy and extending love and saying, I see what you're doing, Amy. I really see what you're doing. I get it. What if we tried something different? And just opening up a little bit of space. So often for many, many, many survivors, self-compassion isn't an option. Grace isn't viable.
It's vital.
It's vital, but it's not viable. The system cannot manifest what it's never experienced before.
But once it does.
Yes. So what that little shift creates a new space because we're neurobiologically wired for compassion. It's very adaptive for us to feel compassion for other living beings.
But not for ourselves necessarily.
No. Yeah. Because it's not necessarily part of survival.
And it's not a part of society.
No.
Giving yourself a lot of compassion, love, care, and grace is twisted as selfish behavior. At least in my culture.
Yeah.
Because you think of it's, I mean, it's not that jarring, but it's very, think of everyone else, take care of everyone else. So you just get left 10th on the list. So inevitably, you don't give yourself that grace.
And so how do we start bringing that energy in if it's not anything that our brain has ever felt is safe or that we're deserving of? Because self-compassion is a skill. It's not something that we're innately wired to do.
Right.
And that's, even that little data point for so many of my patients is really, really important. It's like, there's a reason you're not self-compassionate. You were never taught to have self-compassion. It wasn't a part of your survival strategy. It can even feel dangerous.
How can we do that now? What are some steps or some things people can do to help rewire how they see themselves, how they see all these traumas and all of it?
Yeah. Well, one of them literally is that idea of just taking Amy and giving her some love. I have clients who imagine her as an imaginal figure or have a stuffed animal that is literally like their little amygdala doll. And these are not children that I'm talking about. These are adults or a plant. It's like Sandra Bullock in 28 Days. You have the recovery plant. You have to keep the plant alive before you're allowed to start dating. It's like that. They have to keep the plant alive, water it, tend to it, care for it. And because all of those are acts of compassion. And the plant is a representation of them tending to their sweet little brain that is desperate and hungry for real tenderness and gentleness and care.
Yeah.
So it's finding these little externalized ways to start to bring the energy in.
For me, it was, it's very simple. It's just spending a lot more time with good girlfriends. Really helped rewire my brain.
And actually listening to them?
And actually listening to them. And it wasn't and it was because we went very inward together through our shared experience and also spending a lot of time on my own and doing the work and also doing therapy and also diving into parts of spirituality that can offer that as well. And I think it's all of it. It's whatever works for you. But hearing some of these things out loud with people that I love and trust really did help me bring some of that compassion back to myself.
Yeah, it rewires. Well, that's the connection core value. So when there's connection and legitimate safety, and we are open to receiving the words that people are sharing with us, that will start to override the system. And a big part of that is when our brain expects threat and instead it receives safety. So you just said you went deep, you really connected with them. I would hypothesize, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that perhaps this was the first time you shared with safe people some really deep, meaningful things that maybe you had historically tucked away, been embarrassed about, or fearful that people might judge.
Right.
And when you shared them, you were met with tenderness and support and care. That breaks the prediction pattern for the brain.
And also just accepting they're all human.
Oh, yeah. And
being allowed to be human.
Yeah.
And which is why I love your work, because you bring the human element into it so much, your own human element. And I've done the same thing with this show. It's really just me. And if you can't do that and really give people the permission not to judge you, then they can also be that way with themselves.
Yeah.
You know, let's look at all of you, because I guarantee you, I have, something very similar in me, where these are not isolated cases. I think people, when they think of trauma, they think something really huge, and it doesn't have to be.
No, we dismiss our trauma. I mean, so often our clients will come in and simply say, like, well, it's not a big deal. Like, that's not, the brain is not calibrating this on your big deal versus somebody else's big deal. It's only calibrating it on your big deal. That's the only baseline, is your brain. So how about holding space for what actually happened and honoring the lived truth of that reality?
So now if we were to flip this onto the abuser, or someone who, whether they're doing it knowingly or not, is inflicting trauma onto someone else. What's the science behind their ability to change and rewire their brain?
And it depends. It really does. There's different layers to the possibility of change. And so Dr. Ramani does a lot of work around narcissistic abuse and narcissism. And there's some concretized experiences in our brain that are pretty hard to change. Different types of sociopathology, stuff like that. For some people who are perpetrators, who really want to do the deep work to unwind and understand why they're causing harm, there is the opportunity for change. The hardest thing is usually their willingness to want to do the work, to want to peel back the layers and really look at the harm that has been caused because of their actions. That's usually much harder because the shame gets in the way. And so it's easier to stay in the pattern and just move on to the next person, rather than to turn inward and go, oh, mea culpa.
It's really me.
Yeah.
What about someone who has a lot of anger?
Yeah.
Is it a communication issue, or is it because it's a trauma issue?
It's an amygdala issue. It's an amygdala issue. So when somebody has a dearth of emotion, so that sad and anger, the body's going to usually choose a reactive emotion that taps into that core value of agency and empowerment. I can create change through anger. I can make things happen. And when our amygdala has taken the wheel, so to speak, reactivity is a very common one. And because it's safe. It's much safer to be forward, dukes up, than it is to be back on one foot, going, oh, staying small.
What is going on in the mind of someone like that, who's very angry and very reactive? And you can sit next to them in the car and you're doing something that's not even a big deal
to them, yeah.
But they feel that they can now just tear you apart with their words and their tone. What's going on in their mind?
Would you hypothesize, having been through a version of this?
What do you mean?
What do you
what
think?
What do I think? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see a trapped little kid who's very angry, but I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. And they may not either. So that could be a adaptive, now maladaptive strategy that eventually manifested. There is a certain type of neurobiological phenomena called defensive rage, which is a very specific nuclei in our amygdala that when it gets tapped causes that blackout rage. So if you remember, orange is the new black, crazy eyes.
Yeah.
And that is a opposite survival strategy to dissociation. Rather than going possum or becoming derealized or depersonalized, they go into real rage. And it's different than fight. So our brain is hardwired to ensure we stay alive. So there can be, for some people, a wire that gets tripped and they go into complete attack mode with no awareness that that's actually what they're doing until they're in the aftermath of it. And if they're not able to really even remember what's happening, there's no accountability.
Well, there's no remorse from what I've seen.
For many people,
no
there's
remorse.
not.
And the attitude is, this is just how I am.
Yeah.
It's cultural. I'm a man.
Yeah. And the cultural piece can be a really important part of it, because if that's what's been modeled,
mm-hmm.
and if that's a part of kind of the patriarchal through line of power, then it's okay.
I also see it as their version of, it's their way of surviving as well. And it just gets so embedded and so trapped in their psyche that it shows up in how they speak to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a gradient of how dark and how angry.
Yeah. And it usually then gets fed by resentment and even more anger and frustration and more rage that then gets sprinkled with bits of shame if there are moments where they realize that, they did accidentally cause harm to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But that shame sprinkling then results in greater defensivity and anger. And so it becomes a very, very nasty cycle where the people they really actually do want to have a relationship with get driven further and further from them, but their
mm-hmm.
brain cannot compute what's happening.
Right.
So by holding on tighter, it's by controlling more, which
mm-hmm.
means more anger, more control, more rage.
And when you're in a codependent relationship,
you get stuck.
You believe that you are the only person who understands this person.
Yes.
So you must stay because they can't survive in the world without you. You're the only person.
You're the only one.
You're the only one.
You can save them and possibly change them, which we can't do.
Yeah. When we look at children and if they have an angry parent, are children taking these on? And how do we change it and catch it early on?
Yeah. Well, as we're developing, our caregivers are the model for how we are in the world, especially when we're very young, before we go into an educational program or kindergarten, preschool,
mm-hmm.
where there are other dynamics. And so, or if we spend a lot of time with our family, extended family, then all of those individuals, the village, become the model for how to be in the world. So there can be protective variables, even if there is one very angry parent, but there are other protectors who are modeling an alternative way to be. But we certainly do learn from what is happening around us. And I mean, that's why school is effective. We go to school, things get modeled, and we learn.
Right.
That doesn't mean that that is the future template for how we're going to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It does mean that as the parent, it's a larger call to action to help the child learn how to have a breadth of gradients of emotions, to use their words, to be able to have a relationship with their body, their somatic experience of what's happening, of, my chest feels really tight. And oftentimes the body sense comes before there's an actual emotional explosion, and starting to teach tools. And I've worked with parents who have children as young as 2-3 years old who have significant neurodivergence and emotional dysregulation considerations. And it's really lovely how children can learn to have a partnership with their own body and use tools proactively to regulate. And they want to be regulated, because being dysregulated is uncomfortable. We don't like it. And so that becomes the opportunity then, is building in tools for regulation into the day-to-day life of the household. And of course, if there is a lot of anger, are there additional steps for safety planning, risk management that need to be done to best protect the children?
So when you moved on from, I don't want to say moved on, but when you met your now current husband,
yes.
What was the process like to now seeing this person differently and seeing yourself differently and showing up differently? Because I'm curious for myself too.
Yeah.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. Naz, my now husband.
What's his name?
Naz.
Oh, that's my ex-husband's name.
No.
Hold on. What is he like?
Hold on.
Nazareth?
Yeah, Nazim.
Nazim. Okay,
Nazim.
got it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a funny coincidence.
That is funny. That is really funny.
It's not a common name.
No, not at all. I'm sure you guys would have the same experience that when you make reservations, they're always like, "Oh, is it the rapper?"
Right.
Yes. It's like, it's not, but we don't tell them that ahead of time.
Right.
No. This is going to sound it sounds funny, but it was actually very real.
Mm-hmm.
So Nas still has different organization now, but he had a job where he was on the road all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just put my house I lived in Monrovia at the time, up for sale, and I was moving down to Orange County to launch a new business. And so in a way it worked great because Nas lived in Pasadena and I was going to be an hour and a half away. He was on the road all the time. So my brain's like, codependency, there's not a toehold for you here. Because he was never around. And that felt really safe. And that created a physical and geographical space for my brain to slowly rewire into a felt sense of safety, of really deeply caring about a human. And over time, as we were dating and getting to know each other, I started to notice that sometimes I would miss him and then I would miss him a lot. But it didn't feel enmeshed or dangerous. It felt really pure and lovely. It was interesting. One thing he would say as we got deeper into our relationship, though, is he would say, I need you. And I would have a very clear gut punch reaction of, you don't need me. You want me in your life. And he'd say, no, I really need you. I really, really, really need having you. I love having you here. I need you. He's very sweet. And it made me very uncomfortable for a long time. And now I've been able to reconcile that a little bit as to, it's not need in the way my brain would translate need. Like he's incredibly autonomous, individualistic, like very him. But it was very interesting to notice how that would make me so scared whenever he would say that, and I would pull back because it would trigger for me the codependency pull, and I would want to run in the other direction. And so when he eventually asked me to marry him, it was a very rocky time. And leading up to the marriage was a very rocky time because my amygdala had a lot of opinions. Not only because of what had happened with my previous wedding. And my dad literally said, I kid you not. When Nas asked my dad for my hand, which was very sweet, very Midwest.
It's very Armenian too.
Yeah. My dad said, well, there's 2 rules. No elephants, which has a funny backstory to it. And you have to get to the end. You have to get to the altar. And we did both. But it was really interesting noticing my amygdala struggling and how he held space for all of it.
Yeah.
And I think part of it also, was that he's an engineer. I'm a deeply, deeply feeling human. As he says, I have all of the feels, and I think I have all of them times 2 sometimes. Whereas he's an engineer. And so there's a little bit of a buffer between us when I'm having all the feels. And he's like, can I give you a hug? Something's happening. Don't know what it is. There's a lot of words. Hug?
Do you think it's really just pacing?
Yeah, that's fundamentally what
that's what I'm doing now in my current relationship. Slow. It's pacing. And I'm stopping all the time and telling my amygdala, there's no threat here.
Yes.
You can relax. No one, and because of that fear of abandonment that I grew up with as a child, no one's leaving you.
Yeah.
And even if they do, you're fine.
Yeah. And that's the self-compassion piece of even honoring and labeling that energy. And does that energy for you have a very specific energy field, the abandonment fear?
Big time.
Yeah. Me too.
A lot less now that I've, really honed in on it. But it did dictate for a long time. And also, I think when you sense similar patterns in someone that I sensed before, you equate, well, if he's very macho in these ways that I may be attracted to, that means it's also, the other side of that is the anger and is
yes.
And it's not.
It's not. It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be because
somebody can be a both and.
Exactly.
They can be tender and macho and strong and gentle.
And it doesn't have to be someone from my community to understand all the values I understand. I mean, it's really just a rewiring of the brain.
Yes.
Because I stayed in a situation for 16 years because I had told myself, this is it. And that's the survivor in me thinking, you've invested. This is it. This is the only safe place for you. Because if you want all these things, you want a dad, you want to be protected. The world is an unsafe place. Those men aren't going to love you or protect you. And then it's all that rewiring that it's not even about the man. I'm here to
Mhm.
protect myself, and that's okay.
And I think that really becomes the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in the world that we live in, there's so much information that pushes back on that, especially as women.
Mm-hmm.
How are we allowed to take care of ourselves? How are we allowed to show up for ourselves? How are we allowed to communicate, to set boundaries? And all of that becomes the rewiring and the relearning
Mm-hmm.
to build courage and bravery to say, I am deserving. I am enough. I get to choose what it is that I want for my life from this moment forward, not based on what I was taught growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does. A lot of courage, a lot of humility.
Yes, perfect word for it. A lot of humility.
To be able to say, no, you really didn't feel loved as a kid.
Yeah.
Just because you felt like a daddy's girl because we got along so well doesn't mean you were really loved.
Mm-hmm.
But just because you weren't loved doesn't mean you have to accept half-ass love.
Yeah. And it means you get to create your own definition of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is yours. It's unique to you.
Right. What my needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a constant practice, I think, to remind ourselves because we forget. Because our brain, again, always wants to resort back to to Amy.
Yeah.
Right? So we're not thinking on this. I mean, I think after repetition, what does that look like to apply the practice of this new way? Because it doesn't just inform everything else, from this moment on.
No. And I think that's one of the hardest things to really hold space for in a recovery journey when there's been a lot of trauma, is that trauma is learned very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
When we go into a threat state, we survive, our brain goes, got it. I know what to do to survive this thing. That is the new pattern. We're just going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Learning a new way forward is about repetition. It's about rehearsal. It's about really taking the intentional time to do the self-care, the spiritual work, the body care, the time with friends, healthy, adaptive friends who reinforce the world that we're building into.
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about in my trainings and with my clients that trauma is easy. The learning of new is hard. You don't learn how to do addition, 1 + 2 = 3, and then jump into calculus.
Right.
We need to start at the basic building blocks of what if I'm okay today? And sometimes that's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm okay today? And that's good enough.
Yeah.
But that possibility is the thing that opens the door up for the brain to go, what if I can be okay tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Let's try that on. So it's a lot of little micro practices that we build into our day-to-day lives. And we live in a world where people don't take some of those things seriously. But a gratitude act every single day, one that we have our patients do, is list 3 items that you're grateful for at the end of the day. We pair that with something called mindful touch, which is a very specific, comforting form of touch that electrochemically is very good for our brain. And it's wiring the brain to be intentional about finding things to be grateful for. When we're in a threat state, we don't find things we're grateful for. We're too busy scanning for tigers.
And what does that do to our nervous system?
Is scanning for tigers or being grateful?
Scanning for tigers. When you have lived in an environment where you feel you've been scanning for tigers with occasional dopamine hits that make you feel life is good.
It's good.
Because I go out on Saturday nights. Life is great.
Yeah.
But Monday through Friday, you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
What does that do to because I felt in the last 2 years, my nervous system just started to relax.
Yes. Yeah.
And I didn't realize how tired my nervous system actually was.
Yeah. Well, when we're in a state of ongoing hypervigilance or even vigilance, we're living in a threat state. So we have something we talk about, the case for survival. Case means, what are our thoughts? What's our autonomic nervous system? What's our somatosensory responses and our emotional responses? All of those become a constellation through which we experience the world. It's like the opposite of rose-colored glasses. And that means our entire system's being wired into a threat reactive state. So we're always ready, which means calm can even feel dangerous. We don't feel like we can actually breathe because if we take a deep breath, we might not be ready to pivot when we need to pivot. Our emotions and our thoughts keep us on guard, which usually means they're not very kind to us. Because if we start to calm down, if we're not perfect, if we make a mistake and we extend grace to ourselves, what does that mean? if we're still living in an environment where there's danger. It means we're in danger. It means we could fail. It means we could be punished. So the entire system is up.
Mm-hmm.
And the act of relaxing in of itself can feel very dangerous.
Yeah, I felt my body change afterwards.
Yeah.
My shoulders relaxed. My posture changed.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine said to me, you stopped holding your breath.
Mm-hmm. You became a good breather, as we say.
A much better breather.
Yes.
And now it's amazing. My breath, centers me because I have, I meditate every day. I don't do breath work, but just stopping and breathing throughout the day is a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. And oxygen is literally the fuel for our mind-body system.
Mm-hmm.
But the act of breathing can even feel like it's too time-consuming when we're in threat.
Yeah. So how else can our Amy show up? Or because we know that healing is not linear. So to say that I've done the work in the last 2 years, this could still show up later on.
Of course.
And so it's not 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Well, it is in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And a really important part of the recovery process is looking at the experience of 1 step back as an opportunity. Mm. So we talk all the time about, and let me give an example. In our team meetings, we do successes and opportunities. An opportunity is literally a challenge, but it's an opportunity because we're saying, well, here's something that I can now make it a definitive, different choice about that was complex, but there's agency because I can do something different now. Mm-hmm. And so whenever data shows up that's tied to the past, even the narrating that now as an opportunity becomes empowering. Rather than, I got triggered and then I went and ate 2 pints of ice cream and crawled into bed for 3 days. It's like, okay, so what's the opportunity? Well, you could not keep ice cream in the house, or because then you have to at least go to the store to get the ice cream, or you're going to crawl into bed. So you have an accountability buddy who, if they don't hear from you for 36 hours, they reach out, and if you don't respond, they come and knock on the door and say, "Hey, time to get up."
Yeah.
Right. We can build in little micro experiences to adjust us out of the pattern, because Amy's really powerful. And so when we get into the pattern, it's hard to break the pattern, but we can use the opportunities to build stepping stones in between to create change.
And what happens to Amy when we heal?
Oh, she gets happy. So Amy is involved in all of our feelings, the good, bad, beautiful, amazing, and incredible. She prioritizes salience, what jumps out at us. Mm-hmm. And whatever is biggest, the boldest, and the brightest is the thing that she latches onto, which means it could be excitement rather than anxiety.
So Amy is there to help us.
Yeah.
She's
a superhero.
She's a superhero.
Yeah, she's the thing that keeps us alive. We just have to help her unwind old patterns of survival if they're no longer adaptive. Because back then, they were. That's why she remembered them. She goes, that worked.
It's amazing. What are you working on now?
Oh, a lot of things. What am I working on now? I have a couple new books coming out. One is specific to traumatic grief. It's a bit of a companion for my memoir on exercises, activities, case studies that are just really warm connection points of how all the different types of grief unfold around us to normalize the grieving journey, because it's messy and painful and complex, and grief has no linear structure at all. So I'm really excited about the way that book's coming together. I have another book that's coming out that's for caregivers of individuals who have Alzheimer's or dementia, which is a very personal passion project of mine. So we're partnering with a couple different orgs nationwide for that one to help the caregivers out, because it's really, speaking of grief, it's incredibly hard, painful, complex work to be a caregiver for somebody who's suffering.
Absolutely. I just had someone on talking about that very thing and how stoicism really helped him move through that.
Yeah, I've listened to a little bit of that one.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Yeah,
where can people find you in your practice?
So we are located in Pasadena, right off of Lake Avenue. We are brick and mortar, so we are in person. We have a beautiful office suite and an amazing team. So if anybody's looking for some support, reach out. We do free consultations, individual therapy, group therapy, couples work. We also do neurofeedback, brain training for those who have particularly sticky Amy's. And then we also do a lot of courses and educational work. So my practice is Dr. Kate Truitt and Associates. And then I have the Truitt Institute, which is an educational platform. And we are just rolling out a whole bunch of our initial research studies, which are really, really exciting to see the outcomes of what we're getting with the neuroscience-based model, or one of the only in the world, really, that's foundationally neurobiologically based and trauma-informed.
It's fascinating that you mentioned grief, because I think, one is incumbent on the other with trauma, but grief can stay longer in subtle ways. Yeah. Because even though I feel I've healed myself in so many ways, the grief hasn't left.
Yeah. And grief, I don't think ever leaves. It gets softer. It changes forms. It helps us become wiser. And we grieve because we love.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. I've had to rework that. As I said, it's very interconnected, right? So when I'm not with my children, I grieve that all the time. But I've rewired my brain to tell me they're having fun. Yeah. They're with their dad. They're having a great time. Yeah. So be happy for your children.
Yes.
And
it can be a both and.
Exactly. Yeah. But we're not, when you are pounded one way of thinking your whole life, it's very hard to change that. But once you do, you relax. And Amy says, I don't need to interfere right now.
Exactly. And the both and is one of the most critical parts of any recovery process, of the honoring of whatever complex, difficult, even painful feelings are coming up, and set shifting into what's the other opportunity or possibility here.
Right.
I can miss them. I can be grieving the fact that they're not with me, and also honoring the fact that there's something positive happening for them right now.
Well, that takes time and wisdom, course. But it is possible.
It is very possible and very important.
Yeah. Dr. Kate Truitt, thank you so much for being here today. This is an amazing conversation. I hope we can have another one.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To be continued.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in to Breaking Through with Ellina Abovian. For our community to grow, please like and share, and also leave a review on this episode. Of course, you can find me on social media and let me know what you'd like to talk about in future episodes. Nothing is off limits, so let's have some fun.